We're coming to you live from the Broadcast Centre of Tipp FM on Pearse Street this morning. I want to talk to Pete Griffiths now, ex-Scientologists of Ireland. Ex-members of the secretive religion are coming together at a conference this weekend to expose what they say is Scientology's fraud and human rights abuse. It's entitled Scientology Enough is Enough. It's a 2-day conference taking place in Dublin. Pete Griffiths, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Seamus. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm fine. Now, tell us about Scientologists. We've heard it's a shadowy organisation. There are certain very well-known members of it, people like John Travolta and Tom Cruise. But people who've been involved, some people who've been involved with the Scientologists say it's a very furtive and extremely complex and maybe even dangerous. Is it a religion? Is it a cult? Or what is it?
It's a good question. If you want my honest opinion, I'm going to say it's organised fraud from the top down. The sad thing is that the people who call themselves Scientologists don't even realise that they're victims of that. They call themselves a religion. Some people call them a cult. Their names they hide behind. Essentially, it's a criminal activity, and they're about to go to trial in Belgium, and they have been found guilty in France of criminal activities. So I'm not going to hesitate in calling them simply criminals. Yet, the individual Scientologists don't even realise what they've got themselves into. So there's the fraud and there's the danger.
All right, so say somebody is searching around, looking for something to believe in, and somebody approaches them. Is that how it happens? Does somebody approach you?
They tend to get people furtively. They put signs outside their mission that says free stress test or free personality analysis. There is a sign there saying there is Scientology, but you're not going to necessarily see that, because if you see a free stress test sign and somebody says, hey, come in and do the stress test, you might be feeling at that moment that you need a stress test.
Okay, so let's say what happens if you do go in and sign up to it. What happens then?
If you do go in, the test itself is free. That much is true. However, the test is simply a sales tool to get you to either buy a book or do a course. And even, like, some people have had horrible experiences even doing the free personality test. There's been cases of people who have actually been so distraught after the meeting. Like, for example, I spoke to people in Dublin who were told that they would probably commit suicide if they didn't take the courses on offer, which is absolutely frightening. And some people have actually done this, some famous cases. I would say to anybody who wants to learn about this is to simply do their own research online or anywhere else they can get the information and make up their own mind based on facts rather than what people say.
Now, if it's a criminal organisation and if it's as dangerous and as furtive as you say it is, how come it's so successful?
Is it successful? I don't know how you'd measure success. They claim millions of members and so on. None of that is actually factually true. People who have had evidence of the lists of members of Scientology say it's numbers of years ago it was 38,000, that it's certainly dwindling as the years go by and people leave and tell the truth about what's happened to them. I think what's happening now is like in the age of the internet, they can't hide the facts and the truth from people forever. So.
Yeah, and again, being the devil's advocate here, stuff appears on the internet that isn't always provable. In other words, people can throw out allegations, maybe... True. Maybe it's not as bad as you're painting it, for instance.
Well, again, I'd let people do their own research and decide for themselves. There's a new documentary came out or it will be coming out in March, the United States, filmed by HBO, and it's by Alex Gibney, the Oscar award-winning director. And he had a team of 160 lawyers make sure that everything he said was going to not upset too many people due to facts. So they've researched everything. This documentary hopefully will blow the lid on Scientology. He's asking Tom Cruise and John Travolta, what are you doing supporting this organization?
It begs that question. Why are those people doing it? I mean, is there a lot of money for people at the top of it?
No, quite the opposite. They've got to give money. And one of the things that you do in Scientology, like a number of so-called religions, is you do confessions. And when you do confessions, they write down everything you say. It's my belief that they use confessional material to keep Tom Cruise and John Travolta in line and quiet, because they'd be afraid they might lose their fan base if certain things
is there any written down version of Scientology that people can study?
There are millions of words written by the founder, L. Ron Hubbard, and they're absolutely fascinating because if you want to look for contradictions, you'll find them. He'll say one thing one day and contradict himself the next day. It's mind-bogglingly fascinating.
Yeah, but is there a God to be worshipped?
No. The only God in Scientology is money.
I see. So money is the God.
Money is the God. There's no doubt about that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And do they do, like some organisations who might be shadowy might say, we do some very good work. Do they do any good work?
They claim to. They claim they've got these social betterment organisations. Like one's called, Narcanon's a drug rehabilitation. 9 people have lost their lives in Narcanon since 2009, and that's what we know about. They claim a 76% success rate. Independent studies say the success rate is more like 6%.
to be the devil's advocate, people who are suffering from extreme drug dependence could be susceptible to losing their lives in any case.
They could indeed. If they come across Scientology's drug rehabilitation, it will cost them £30,000 or euro. I'm not too sure of the exact figure.
Where do they get them? Where do they get the money for this? Where do ordinary people get the money to get into Scientology?
You've got to be pretty rich to be a successful Scientologist. If you're not rich, you join staff and hopefully to try and get your courses for free. It doesn't often work that way, and they have a clause that says if you leave, you've got to pay them back, which is another reason why some people never leave, because they feel that there's this unenforceable contract. They call it a freeloader bill.
Yeah. Has anyone gone into Scientology as a kind of an agent provocateur, just to, like an investigative journalist? Has anyone gone in to try and uncover the several layers of
that's a really good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. I think there may have been, but I don't know for sure. That's a really good question, and it would take a very brave person to go undercover in Scientology, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking of someone like John Sweeney. He's been described...
I think they'd recognise John Sweeney straight away.
Yeah, I know they would, because they've described him as... he sure scares the hell out of me. The Church of Scientology says Sweeney is a liar, a bigot, and a psychotic, so they don't like him.
They don't like him at all. John has actually written a reply to one of those things that was said to him. I think it was for the Cork Examiner. It might be in the letters page there. John states his case, and needless to say, he denies all those allegations.
Okay, so look, this cult, religion, whatever you like to call it, it must have something going for it to be as successful as it is. What ensnares people? What hoax people?
Well, the interesting thing, Seamus, is when we touched on about how a person first gets involved, one of the things that they're trained to do is find what they call your ruin. Now, your ruin will be the thing that you consider is totally messing up your life.
Oh, yeah.
It could be absolutely anything. For a teenage boy, it might be his inability to talk to girls or boys or whatever.
Yeah.
It could be your lack of... you can't hold a job, you don't have enough money, you can't... Whatever reason you come up with, they will say, oh, Scientology has the answers to that. And they say it with such conviction that you buy into it.
So they'll go for the weak point.
Well, they do. They absolutely do. The sad thing is that, people have been in Scientology for 30 years with the ruin, so-called, exposed, and never had it solved. Because if you had a problem, you solved the problem, you wouldn't go back. Your problems would be over.
Right, enough.
It doesn't work that way. It's like a ladder that if you reach the end, you think, what the hell am I doing up here? And you fall off.
Right, so what about if you want to leave it? Is it difficult?
Very, very difficult to leave. They tell you that anyone can leave, but the truth is absolutely different. There's an Irish ex-Scientologist called John Dignan who wrote the book called The Complex. He had to plan his escape. There's a book written by Mark Headley called Blown for Good. He had to plan his escape. The closer you get to the top of Scientology, the harder it is to leave. And people do have to escape. And it's scary. It really is scary.
So is there a Mr. Big? Is there somebody...
there is a Mr. Big. Yep. His name is David Miscavige. Not to be confused with David McSavage, unfortunately.
Yeah. David, I've heard of this guy.
Yes, yeah. He's the guy who wears the expensive suits, the Egyptian cotton shirts, the handmade shoes. All the money siphons up to him, ultimately, as it siphoned up to L. Ron Hubbard when he was alive.
And obviously he denies all the things that you've been talking about.
Of course. People like me, critics, we just lie. We just make this stuff up. Even when we have like court documentation and factual evidence, they think we've just made it up. So,
do you think it is kind of shrinking now, the Scientology?
There's no question about it. It is shrinking because it's like you can't hide something like this forever. People will talk. Now, the thing that's kept Scientology going for the last 60 years is the fact that people have been afraid of them because they are a scary organization. They even have a policy called Fair Game, which says that people who are critics may be sued, lied to, tricked, or destroyed. And that in itself is just frightening language to use.
Yeah.
It is an absolutely horrifying organization. It's way worse than anybody thinks. But I would say to anybody, do your own research and make up your own mind.
Yeah, Caller is wondering, finally, is it true that Scientologists believe God is an alien living on a different planet?
Yeah, in a kind of a strange way. The best way to find out the answers to what Scientology really believes, in a fella called Marty Rathbun, who runs a blog called Moving Up a Little Higher, published 8 key points that Scientologists actually believe in, and they are well worth reading, because you probably don't know this, but Earth is a prison planet, and we're all prisoners here, kept here by psychiatry, and critics
sounds like the Hotel
people from going free.
Sounds like the Hotel California, doesn't it?
Well, when you think that the whole thing was started by a science fiction writer, the penny starts to drop and it begins to make a little sense. So
when and where is this conference?
The conference is on at Film Base in Temple Bar, and we're kicking off tomorrow around about 6:30 in the evening.
Okay.
We're also live streaming. If anyone wants to go to exscientologist.net, they'll get an address to the live stream, exscientologistisland.net.
All right, that's Pete Griffiths. Thank you very much, Pete, for talking to us this morning. That's Pete Griffiths, ex-Scientologists Ireland. We'll take a break.